maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Can't never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Ufa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Ufa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody holla. This a me name is Ufa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Ufa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Ufa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them.
March 15th, 2026. This is where we make sense of the news. Either the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman. Our co-host is Brother Mutota, revolutionary from the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago. And we guest today have some challenges with the audio on Zoom. So we have a picture up. He's been a guest before. We have to talk to it through WhatsApp. His name is Brother Alister Thomas. Oh my, I just gone blank. Thomas. Brother Alister Thomas. He's a cultural icon from Antigua. Good morning, Brother Ako. Good morning, Brother Alister.
Morning, Sister YaYa. Good morning to Brother Alister. Sorry about the technical challenges you're having in Antigua. Good morning to all.
Casting on Creme Radio, and it was to have this reasoning with. So make my mind. I think this first half hour, I don't want as much as know. Tell us what was the climate like in the Caribbean before March 13th, 1979. The second segment, we're going to get into more of the Grenada River. The last segment kind of look at lessons we can learn. So, Brother Ako, why you choose Brother Alister for be the brother for have this reasoning?
Because Brother Alister's organization, the ACLM, under Tim Hector, it was known as the Antigua Caribbean Liberation. It was called the Afro-Caribbean Liberation Movement first. Okay, in the early formation, it's called the Afro-Caribbean Liberation Movement. And later on, it used the same acronyms, but called itself the Antigua Caribbean Liberation Movement. And that organization was headed by Tim Hector, who was a very prominent journalist, activist, even a cricket commentator at one point in time on the radio. So he's very, very critical in struggles and in the social, cultural and political life of Antigua. Very well respected, and one of the founding members of what was called the Caribbean Steering Committee, that organization that was preparing for the Caribbean delegation to attend the 6th Pan-African Congress in Tanzania. So it's a very, very important figure. And I think because Brother Alister was part of that organization, which also had very close links with the New June movement, which was the organization that led the revolution in Grenada, we felt that it would be most appropriate for Brother Alister, especially since he was a former member of ACLM, and his intimate knowledge of the Grenada Revolution and of Caribbean politics, especially in the Eastern Caribbean, of which Antigua is part of.
Thanks. I believe his audio just came in. Brother Alister, can you say something so we can make sure we can hear you?
Good afternoon again to your listeners and viewers. I've been dabbling and trying my best. I'm not at the best of the technology, but I tried something on a laptop.
So that's one of the beauty, right? That when we have stick-to-itiveness, we learn new skills when faced with new challenges. One of the things that we'll be patient and humble and flexible. So give thanks to the African ancestresses and ancestors and to the Creator. We know this connection had to happen one way or the other.
Thank you.
Just because when I come on, I see he have on it in solidarity with our Cuban sisters and brothers. He have on a revolutionary cap. I run upstairs and got change my clothes and put on my stuff. Give thanks, brother. Give thanks. I don't get loud. Make I calm myself. Then I'm so excited about this conversation and Brother Akko sharing why he chose you to have this conversation. So, Brother Alister, I had asked, and Brother Akko said why he chose you. What was the climate in the Caribbean before the Grenada Revolution?
It was that period of which the progressives, those who wanted to create a Caribbean different than a copy or a mimicking process of post-colonialism, because what you had at the time were people pretending and states pretending to be independent and creating a new course. And for the most part, the progressive thinkers of the Caribbean, the Walter Rodneys, the Tim Hectors, the leader then of the Antiguan Caribbean Liberation Movement, and as Brother Akko said, part of this regional institutional body, recognized that the Caribbean population, for most part, were being shortchanged. I have a radio program called Caribbean into the 21st Century. It's aired on 107.3 FM. And yesterday I said, for the umpteenth time, that for me, the Caribbean people, the population, were played. That is, we never attained, except for those who have now gone to republic. But when we attained independence, it was a mockery and a sham. And let me explain that. The provisions of all the constitutions of these supposedly new states had as its guiding principle or philosophical grounding in the Constitution, saying that these supposedly new people swear their allegiance to Her Majesty, her successors and heirs. And you do not need to go beyond that to realize that the Caribbean people are being played. Because if you have that enshrined, and in fact they had that enshrined in almost every single supposedly independent or state that had seemingly journeyed or pretended it journeyed to independence, which is the cutting of the manacles and the shackles of colonialism or legacies of colonialism. But when you read the Constitution, this new document for this new society, for this new journey, for the beginning of a new start from colonialism, you would recognize that nothing, as we'd say in the local parlance, nothing tall goes up. Because if you have enshrined, which they had enshrined, in the provisions of their Constitution, the new independent document, that we swear our allegiance to the Queen, her heirs and successors, meaning indefinitely, infinitum, meaning that we had not moved beyond that. So that you had the progressives who recognized that, yes, the national politicians, as we'd call them that, those who were there just at that eve of supposedly the new beginning, that they made an accommodation either for political power or fearing repercussions or wanting to or believing they could create a new society with this charade, with this mamagain. That is, they were free, but they were not free. They were still being subservient and loyal to the monarchy in the English-speaking Caribbean that introduced slavery and had them in slavery for 400 years. So that the progressives and the Timectors recognized that in order to really create a new society, you had to debunk that. And so they went about creating new thinking and new thoughts. You had the likes of Eric Gary, who was a product of those who had made a compromise. In my view, I can now say it. Deceived the Caribbean people, making them believe that they had genuine independence. That when they were celebrating on independence, they say, yes, we are free at last. Nothing at all go like that. If you have in your constitution the provision which says that you are subservient, I accept my subservience or my continued subservience, infinitum. That's a contradiction of independence. Not one of the single countries who had that in their provision was in fact independent. So that these progressive thinkers recognized, saw through it, and began to realize that you could not create a new society with that legacy and with that manacle on your back and that deception of the people. You could not inspire and motivate new people. So they began to create new thinking, new thoughts. In the case of some of these puppet government or compromised government that really perhaps were more anxious to be in the seat of power, so they accepted the constitution with the continuity of slavery and colonialism or colonialism. They became very despotic. And let me see if I find a quote from Tim. He said something that was very instructive. He said, the Caribbean, with or without independence, has remained petrified, frozen in linguistic blocks, and therefore absolutely dependent on dominant power like the US for both market and capital. But he said something even more profound. He said, the struggle, and I quote him again, and the betrayal, unfortunately, the new party, which arose from this momentous struggle, meaning the struggle supposedly for independence, post-colonialism. He said, and let me read him verbatim as he said it. That is the late Timector. Unfortunately, the new party, which arose from this momentous struggle, did not understand the nature of the struggle, and therefore it betrayed its mission when it came to power. I think that places it in context. So that the Garys, Eric Garys, who developed paramilitary groups, terrorist groups, to keep themselves in power, and that the British, the colonial powers, or the former colonial masters or continued colonial masters, turned their head the other way. Because for most part, they did not transform the economy. They did not empower the people. You voted election day, that did not have anything to do with empowerment of people. That's an exercise. So that Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement recognized that there was just this exercise in futility. And even in that exercise, when the people made a decision to change, they manipulated the process so much with the collaboration with the outside forces that the will of the people were being aborted, so that you had what they call rigged elections, continuously rigged elections in Grenada. So that if the supposedly democratic process that should see to a new society, to see the will of the people, the majority comes out and win, and you have the government, and that process from the start is being undermined, then you leave with no alternative than to accept living continuously under this false this betrayal of independence, but the continuation of an illegitimate government that does not represent the will of the people because they rig the election, or you respond. And the action and response to the masses is always the most important factor, as long as it's not being manipulated by outside forces. And so that Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement recognized that what was happening in Grenada was untenable. This false exercise.
That's a good start off for the segment, brother. Excellent. Brother Akka, what are your 2 cents?
So I just want to sort of give a kind of perspective on the Caribbean in the 1960s, okay, and 70s to understand how these things evolved. So, in the first instance, you had the coming, the attempt at the Federation, which collapsed. And then you had the granting of independence, Jamaica first, on August 6th, I think, 1962, and then Trinidad on August 31st, 1962. Right. So for those younger people who may not know what happened, there was a meeting in a place called Marlborough in which there was an attempt by the British, recognizing that it was losing its influence, decided to create a federation in the Caribbean, right? Without really the consultation of the people. There were some things like a vote and so on, but there was not any real consultation with the people. But the people wanted this kind of unity. But after the discussions, the Jamaicans were not happy with some things. Like the federal capital was put in Port of Spain, and we still have a place in Trinidad called Federation Park, which was supposed to be the area where the federal bureaucrats and so on would live. And so the capital was Trinidad, and then they gave the prime minister to Grantley Adams of Barbados. Now, at that time, Jamaica was the largest economy in the Caribbean. And so Jamaica, I think, sort of felt slighted. A vote was taken, and the people voted for independence. So after Jamaica left the Federation, the second largest economy was Trinidad, and 9 other countries, 10, so Grenada and so on. And Eric Rollas made the most famous speech, it's a most reactionary speech. After Jamaica left, he made a speech called One from 10 Leaves North. In other words, he was saying there were 10, and once Trinidad left, there was nothing. And so when Trinidad also agreed to independence, the Federation collapsed. And so Jamaica...
But
yes?
Let me get clarity on this.
Yeah.
The people of the Caribbean were under colonial rule.
Yes.
I don't know if that the people or if that the British give them one option. Federation means the unity of people across the Caribbean region, and only decide what best for honor as a collective. Or only could get independence for each country, political independence for each country. Those were the options.
Yeah. Yes, those were the options.
The British gave them those options?
But you see, the British gave them those options not in a very honorable way. While they were talking with them, they were also making it difficult for any kind of meaningful federation to occur.
I was going to come in. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. So what happened, for example, Singapore, for example, which was gaining independence around this, and Malaysia, they were given certain, even though they were ex-colonies, they were given certain options that the Caribbean didn't get. Right? So the British, it's a way the British have of saying one thing in one side of their mouth and then doing something else behind your back. So while they were saying that, they were also working internally to create mischief. So in the end, the whole thing collapsed with Jamaica, because you have to understand Jamaica's position. It was the largest economy, largest population, and the two critical positions, the capital and the prime minister, you did afford it to them. Whether you may think it's kind of chauvinistic or not, the point is that they were one of the larger economies, and the largest territory in the Caribbean at the time. And so to leave them out in that kind of way would create some kind of dissension in that population. So in the end, Jamaica, there was a vote, and the Jamaican population agreed to go the independent way. Kind of peaked by what they consider the slight of the rest of the Caribbean and the manipulations of the British. And then shortly after that, Trinidad, right. So I'm trying to frame this to make you understand the context in which the Caribbean. So I would
like to come in here, Brother Aku.
All right, go ahead, Alister.
Say, in addition to that, and just to support your point, that it is not just that they were duplicitous, that they were working appearing to support this federation. But inside of the structure of the federation, they were the dominant factors. They did not allow for the supposedly new journey of the Caribbean people to be shaped by them. They were very much involved in all the structural design, predominantly. That is, you were supposed to be getting this federation, but they were the superimposing how the federation should be designed, the fiscal structure of it, the political structure of it. So that from the onset, they really were not genuine about wanting to see the Caribbean people form a unity and developing a unity in their own image and likeness to break the colonial shackles. So that using or set in motion the likelihood of insularity would only lend for them to pull their hands away. Say, not us, it's Jamaica and then Trinidad. So that I'm saying to you that the British did not genuinely want to see a genuine unity of the Caribbean, these post-colonial countries, because they never wanted to let them go absolutely. And that's why we are back where we are in the era of Trump, almost right at the plantation, that we have no sovereignty, no independence, maybe one man or three men decide our destiny. When we were going towards this federation that they put on the table, it was all about pretending to give us this platform for a unified region, but in fact, a region that they would still manipulate and control. So we have this supposed black leadership in front, but the control of the mechanism of it would be them. And so that the provocation and the creating the structure, it is the structure that provoked Jamaica and Trinidad then to react. Maybe Eric Williams should have reacted differently.
Exactly.
But I think, sorry, go ahead, brother.
No, I'm saying I'm agreeing with you, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I think maturity, I think most of them were very comfortable, even Eric Williams, of wanting to felt more comfortable of pursuing, not building a Caribbean nation, but more comfortable in their control of building island states.
Like, Brother Akka, we have another 8 minutes. You want to finish up your framing?
Yeah. So I was, giving this history to contextualize the Caribbean. And a lot of what Brother Alister said is correct. The British manipulated. In other words, what they were creating was not an independent federation, but a neo-colonial federation, right? So, for example, when the federal elections occurred, the Trinidad government, the PNM, which was the ruling party, lost the elections because the British, because of the racial divide in Trinidad, the British manipulated the Indian population with certain kind of propagandize them, and the same thing happened in Guyana. So in the Caribbean, there was a couple islands, Trinidad and Guyana, which had sort of negative responses to the federation. So the federation collapsed, and then Guyana and Jamaica got independence, Trinidad, and then subsequently other Caribbean islands got independence. But this is 1962. By 1966 in Trinidad, and it's important for me to state this piece of history, because that led to a lot of the revolts that was called the Black Power revolts in the 1970s. By 1966 in Trinidad, because of the what you call anti-colonial stance of the unions in Trinidad, especially the OWTU, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, attacking the multinationals and demanding better wages. And this is something people don't understand. In the 1960s, workers in the oil field and in other parts of the economy worked 6 days a week, 5 days on Monday to Friday, and half day on Saturday. It is the unions who fought to make the work week a 40-hour work week. I remember my uncle worked in the oil fields, and every Saturday he had to go to work on half day, 7 to 12. Okay? When the OWTU waged its struggle, it was making demands for better conditions for the workers, and other unions were doing that. The Transport and Industrial Workers Union, which is another prominent union, the Bus Workers Union, had a major strike. What the government of Eric Williams did was to pass a law called the Industrial Stabilization Act, the ISA, which took the side of the multinationals and the employers as against the workers. So this law was like limiting strike options, creating conditions that made it difficult for workers to demand better wages. It was called the ISA. That was later transformed into the IRA, the Industrial Relations Act, which was even more draconian. But I will deal with the ISA. So by that time, intellectuals in the society began to see that this, after 4 years of independence, this was not an independent state. It was a neo-colonial state evolving into a very oppressive state, not serving the interests of the people. By 1968, Sierra James comes to Trinidad, and he and other colleagues of the left created a party called the Workers and Farmers Party. They lost the elections badly, you know. But at the same time, Walter...
Sorry again, Brother Ako, because when we say these things for the younger one, they lost the elections. We must make it known to the young people that hardly any of those elections were allowed to represent the free will of the people. The outside forces between the United States and Britain manipulated these processes from day one because they did not want some of these progressives that was anti-colonial to emerge so that they had their own subtle and covert means. In fact, they cultivated some of these leaders that they wanted, that were compromisers, to emerge, so that when he said Brother C.L.R. James and his movement, farmers, workers, failed, a lot of that also was a part of the ongoing process of the manipulation of the outside forces, the outside countries, or the post-colonial countries, or the colonial countries like Britain and the imperialist countries, to dictate and to influence what kind of election, what kind of government, what kind of leadership. They almost handpick them. So I just wanted to make that interjection.
Yeah, and I will give you an example of this, because a controversy emerging from that election was a voting machine. They had brought in voting machines, which many people felt could be manipulated, because some of the data they think was inconsistent. So there was a controversy with the voting machine, and the campaign against using voting machines until Trinidad had to resort to the ballot boxes, which in many views many people felt were more transparent. So it's a very important point to note that there was this trouble at the same time, because people believed that the voting machines, right, were not an accurate reflection of what is happening politically. So that was 68. So still in 68, Walter Rodney was a young lecturer at the university in Jamaica, went abroad, but before he went abroad to a conference, before he went abroad, there was he used to what is called do groundings. He wrote a book on it called Groundings with My Brothers. He used to go to the hills among the Rastafarians, the poor people in Trenchtown and all of these places, and talk with the poor and the working people, you know. The Jamaican establishment did not like that this university professor, because a professor is supposed to be an elitist, going and talking with all these poor rastas and so on and so forth in the hills and in the communities of Kingston. So when he went to a conference abroad, and when he came back, he was refused entry into Jamaica.
Made him persona non grata.
Yeah, he was named persona and denied entry into Jamaica. So what happened? There was a rebellion in Jamaica, which is called the Rodney Riots, right? So some of the leaders of the Black poor movement in Trinidad were at that time members of the graduate, the undergraduate, the student government at the university. And so they went to Jamaica and, because he was a lecturer. By the time they came back, another incident that impacted the Caribbean in the 60s was what happened in Canada. A number of Caribbean students was at this university called Sir George Williams University, which is now called Concordia. They felt that they were discriminated against. They had evidence that they were writing their exams, doing better than some of the white students. They were failing, and the white students were passing the exam. So subsequently, what happened was a riot occurred on the campus of Sir George Williams, then, which is now called Concordia, and a computer room was burnt in the process. The Canadian government passed harsh sentences, jailing some of these students, threatening them with jail terms and so on. So in Trinidad, a demonstration against the Canadian High Commissioner took place on the campus. That was one of the first demonstrations. Then subsequently, a demonstration led by students and other groups in the society began to protest against Canadian banks and interests in Trinidad. And that led to what we will call the 1970 Black Power uprising in Trinidad. Right?
Good place to stop, Brother Akko, at 11 o'clock. We have to take the first break, and we have Brother Akko, Brother Alister, where they have one conversation about the 47th anniversary of the only revolution in an English-speaking country. March 13th, 1979 is when the Grenada Revo started. It lasted for 4.5 years. And it's critical that we continue having conversations, especially because, a lot of the English-speaking Caribbean countries, we don't know our own stories from a people's perspective, and the impact is still have on our lives today. So we're going to take the first break here on Sunday Review, the only news review talk show in the country. We'll make sense of the news, and then we'll come back and we'll transition into the heart of the Grenada Revolution. What happened from the people's perspective, and their Breddah will live through their times, and say critical that we get for their voices. Break time.
I'm so excited and I'm so blessed because I always wanted a home which I could call my own, and I'm very happy, excited that it's in me. I don't really can't express it out, but I'm so happy and glad.
We at Housing pushed to ensure that we put a case strong enough together for her so she could enjoy a home with all the basic facilities, because these things are human rights: to have a bathroom, to have somewhere to lay your head in peace, to have shelter that's not leaking, to have a kitchen that you can function as a mom.
I want to thank the Father God for life, and also for the blessing that come in my way. It was my little twins. I'm a grandmother now, and today I received this house. The blessings coming. Thanks. I wait. I say God will make a way, and it came true. The dream finally come true. And I would like to tell everyone out there, it's not just a house, but it's a foundation that will be for a better tomorrow.
I feel overjoyed, I'm happy. And of course, these days are always bittersweet for me because there's so much more that I would love to give my people of Khaled. However, on one full basket. I really have to give a shout out to the team at MIDH, the minister, Miss Mar. They're on top of their game.
Electricity is essential for everyday life, but behind every outlet, a lot is happening to bring you safe, reliable, and sustainable energy. Let's start at the beginning. Independent power producers across Belize generate electricity using a mix of renewable and non-renewable resources. Electricity travels across a network of high-voltage transmission lines capable of transmitting electricity across long distances. Electricity then reaches your nearest substation, where it is adjusted to a lower voltage, making it safe to travel on the distribution lines you see in your community. From there, electricity makes its final journey from the distribution lines to your home, providing you with safe and reliable power when you need it. We continue to serve you.
Smart for everybody. Smart leading everything. Smart give you everything. Smart offer everything. Smart give you everything. North to the east and the south and the west. Smart are the best. Darling, double up my data and give me all the text. In fact, give me a plan for my family. Unlimited calls, so me like it. And Smart make everybody feel happy. Bringing people together, me want it now. Smart got love for everybody. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. More bundles, data plan. Me want my smartphone, internet in my hand. Call me want my Smart plan. Want it right now.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience. With a wide range of customer service options, you save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For added convenience, if all operators are busy, you can leave your number and an operator will return your call as soon as possible to ensure you receive the support you need. Depending on your transaction type, we may need to verify your identity through a set of security questions. And remember, Atlantic Bank will never request your username or password for Atlantic Online via phone call, text, or email, ensuring your personal information remains safe and secure. Our support team is available Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in both English and Spanish. Simply dial 223-1212. This is a dedicated line for our contact center. Atlantic Bank is committed to providing you with exceptional service and the tools you need to manage your finances conveniently and securely. Take full advantage of our easy-to-use contact center services today.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
At Habet and Abet and Brothers Abet, we've always proudly celebrated Women's Month. This year, we celebrate women keeping the balance at home, at work, and in their communities. That's why all March long, all women receive 15% off store-wide, from paints to plumbing and everything in between. Plus, 20 to 65% off lots more deals on sale and clearance. With trusted experience, top quality products, and service that's second to none, we're here to support women every step of the way. Visit or call us today. Happy Women's Month from all of us at Habet and Abet and Brothers Abet, doing our part to balance the scales.
In a democracy, what is good for the government cannot be bad for the people. And what is good for the people cannot be bad for the government.
We came a long way. It's like over 16 years that it was basically like 2-3 houses in that area.
It was wild. One high bush like jungle. I want to take my lick. Say no water, no light. I tell her no about that. We have figured it out.
You know, you wonder how long it will take for this to happen.
A year ago, you were considered squatters.
We made a picado and we came in. I made a teenager. Everybody said it was swamp, it was swamp. When we get in here, it was like gold.
Today, you're landowners.
Very this that for we, and we proud of this.
Now we are claiming our house on the land.
We have worked so hard to make this happen for us.
This is a beautiful day, folks, because we are taking care of the people who have taken care of us. Because we wouldn't be here today without you.
Belize is transforming the way taxes are managed with the Semi-Autonomous Revenue Authority, a modern system built on flexibility, efficiency, and accountability. SAR will have its own human resource policies, ensuring faster hiring, fairer opportunities, and competitive pay that rewards performance. The SARA will also manage its own budget, making it easier to fund what matters most: better technology, improved taxpayer services, and stronger enforcement when needed. With this flexibility comes responsibility. Independent audits, public reports, and parliamentary oversight will ensure full transparency. SARA's transparency, flexibility, and efficiency will ensure smarter decision-making, better taxpayer service, and responsible use of public funds. SARA, flexibility to serve you better, accountability to serve you right.
Welcome back to the second segment of Sunday Review. Sister YaYa, Brother Akko, Brother Alister, and we'll have one conversation primarily about the 1979 13th March Grenada Revolution, known as the Grenada Revo. And in the first segment, we reason about what the Caribbean region was like before that March 13, 1979. I want to know when we got a break, we got juicy conversation, and we have one different perspective. So I want to bring this conversation forward because it's very relevant, especially in today's time. And so oftentimes you hear the generation before another generation would often make comments about the younger generation and what it is that they do not know. So I say, I not disagree that the younger generation no know, but I have to ask Uno, the generation before we, what Uno do to ensure that we, the generation after Uno, know the genuine stories about ourselves and our territories outside of the European colonizer church-state system or books or newspapers. What Uno do to make sure we get it? So I want that to be the conversation, and I want Uno hear what two of them say when I ask them what for Uno generation do to ensure. And I think Brother Alister was in his 70s. So I could be the generation after them. Could be. I want 60 me. I know I don't look it, but I want 60 me. So I don't know really the generation after them, but they're on the cusp. But I want to take it the other generation after them. So I just say, what Uno me do to make we get it? Because before Uno could hold we responsible for not knowing, and then if we don't know, then we can't pass it to the generation after we. What Uno do to make for we generation get it?
So, Sister YaYa, let me, I wanted to finish.
I was going to get in the starting block before my brother.
You go ahead, Brother Alister, go ahead.
That is so succulent. But go ahead. Let's take now, sister. If you were to grasp the thoroughness, the meticulousness, the monetization of those who continue in their philosophy doctrine of controlling the world and controlling the world people and controlling the economy, because they control the economy by controlling the people and the resources. You take the present. Let me say that information in a great volume is available. But we have to ask some pertinent questions. Is it the generation, it's not the C.L.R. James that failed, it's not the Garvey that failed. They did the work, they left the work in the context of time. When we, and I'm not going to sanction the 70s, say 870, but anyhow, I'm not there. But when we were growing up, and that was a point I made yesterday, something called initiative. There is a very extensive, very comprehensive campaign to manipulate the minds of the generation, present generation. You see that thing they call AI. You see the technology and this and that, but there are different facets of it. One of the facets of it by these few men, and they've been able to succeed to do it. The indifference and apathy of young people is not just on their own, because all the period of history, the young people involvement, sometimes they didn't even have documents, but they had something called initiative. That part of that created a consciousness. Nobody left anything. None of my parents was really progressive, so to speak. But if you check all the progressive leaders in Africa, the Caribbean, part of it was initiative. They looked around. Yes, they did not have the influence. They did not have the problem of having the kind of influence today where there's a deliberate program, software programs, manipulative programs to manipulate the mind, to distract young people, not to be serious. Part of it is deliberate. Most of it is deliberate. What I fault, or who I fault most, is in these post-colonial countries where we are in charge of education and information at a certain level, and not to have these information as integral, almost compulsory. Look at the amount of writings that Walter Rodney writes about the past, the present, and the future. How much of that it's there? He's not Rodney in the grave to circulate that. He did the work. How Europe only developed Africa, which is relevant to our present. Capitalism and slavery, and we can go on. But how have we, those who hold the means, to make sure that that information is disseminated from the preschool, primary school, to secondary school, to tertiary? There is where the failure is. And while we are failing to circulate, to spread the news, the history, the struggle, who prevents the school to have every in the Caribbean, that every this time of this year they have discussions from primary school to secondary school, what happened, the Grenada Revolution, which would have made the children, the information today, the documents are there. But the mediums of education and those who are in charge, some of them are the agents for, don't make sure that you don't get this information to the young people. They're in charge of the education system. Our education system should be taking the information laid down that is there. How could you not have Marcus Garvey's struggle as being a part of the compulsory education? Now, if you did that, how can you not have Black history, which is human history for me, because from us all of the people came, as being a compulsory part of education? It would create a new consciousness. Nobody would have to say, oh, you didn't leave it for them. It's all there. But the means by which the information should be disseminated, our so-called, those who are in charge of those mediums, whether it's government or the mediums of education, which is government in some ways, or even private schools, or even the tertiary institutions. Look at the amount of universities. And if you were to do a random survey of people who have graduated and say, come, sit down here. What do you know about the human history of Africa, contribution to education, to civilization? Except they did not specialize, which it should not be. What is the struggle of the Caribbean people during colonial period? They who had colonized us are still doing that by now taking the colonizing tool at a new level where they can control your mind and influence your mind, and you have it in your hand every day. But what is the countermeasure? I think that's the problem. The countermeasure. There is where I'd say we fail. Tim said something very succinctly once. He said the Caribbean people, we fail in economics and politics. I would add and say, where I find that we fail or failing is in the revolution of the education, educating the people with the information that they have there, and they have volumes of it, of the struggle.
Big thanks, brother. Big point. Brother Akko?
So I wanted to go back to the point about what led up to the 1979 revolution, but it is important to understand what Alister is saying to give it a context about the education system, because that is part of why the revolts took place in the Caribbean. Because we were like, if you take it for me, I left the rural part of Trinidad and went to work in the city at 16. And there was a grocery called Hilo. And so we used to go and get paid in a bank near, a mall, what they call a plaza back in the day. It wasn't a mall, plaza, And so this grocery Hilo had books. So I would go in there and see these little books at like $1, $2 on African history. And I was curious. And what I read in those books, I never learned in school. So the point we are trying to make here is what Fanon said. Fanon said, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray itself. So while there may be shortcomings in the previous generations had, there is a responsibility of the current generation to seek out information, to try to know what is happening, and not to be indifferent. And that is what Fanon said. Each generation has a responsibility. Ours was consciousness, reading, providing the material. But importantly, just to support what Alister said, it's an important quote from an article by one of our guests called Macaulay's Men. And Lord Macaulay was a British educator who came to India. And listen what he said, and this applies to the entire colonial project. He said when he came to India in 1834, he was determined to reform his education system by imposing a British model. He viewed Indian knowledge and culture as backward and sought to replace it with European ideals drawn from the Renaissance, scientific revolution, and Enlightenment. And the article says, ironically, all influenced by earlier Muslim intellectual traditions. But listen to the critical point that Macaulay makes here. He said, we must do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. In other words, he saw the education system as a way to create a black Englishman or a brown Englishman in the case of Indians. And that process still happens in the Caribbean today. That's the point Alister is making. That here, after, 60 years of independence, we know nothing about our own history in the Caribbean in a meaningful way. It is not mandatory at our preschool. So you have our leaders, like the last president we had in Trinidad, Coleman Weeks, who said her heroes were Winston Churchill, a man who was responsible for the genocide of 20 million Indians, okay, and Eugenia Charles from Dominica, who sold out the sovereignty of the Caribbean. So the point is, this is the education system that is producing our leaders and producing future leaders. So part of the struggle that we have is not just to transform the politics and the economics, but as an ongoing process to create alternative methodologies or a counter narrative, if you want to call it that, relative to education and information. So I wanted to just make that point to support what Brother Alister said. But to get to the point of what happened with the Green Revolution, the 1970s was a period of turmoil because most people realized that, listen, after independence in Trinidad 8 years later, nothing had changed. So, for example, in banks, which only white Trinidadians and a few black Trinidadians worked in, black people couldn't get a job in the bank and in certain other places. So people were looking at these things and like, we independence and yet black man condition and change. And so what was happening in Canada with the students, with Rodney in Jamaica and so on, and also what is happening in the US with the Black Power and Civil Rights movement, people were beginning to see mirror effects in their own societies. So even though these demonstrations in Trinidad began with the protest supporting the students in Canada, it began to focus on the local conditions. And in the end, demonstrations occurred in Trinidad and Tobago that attacked the economic interests, calling for less crumbs and more of the resources of the country to be distributed among the people, which resulted, for example, in the government nationalizing banks, nationalizing oil industries, and trying to give black people for the first time, and not I say black Africans and Indians for the first time, positions of executive positions in multinationals and so on. One of the important points to note is that Maurice Bishop said he was leaving England as a student on the way to Grenada and stopped in Trinidad and saw one of the demonstrations. And he said this inspired him to go to Grenada to do what he saw in Trinidad. So this was a period of upheaval. And after 1970, throughout the entire Caribbean, Trinidad is the furthest south, all through the Caribbean, there were protests, uprisings, demonstrations as far as St. Croix, Bermuda, all through the Caribbean. This consciousness began to rage as people saw the deficiencies in their societies that even though independence had been granted, and some who were not independent yet in other parts of the Caribbean, who demanded that we now become fully independent nation. So this is the environment in which the Grenada Revolution emerged. It was a period of radicalization, of a different kind of perspective of our own reality, and we demanded a reality rooted in our own history and in our own reality. So this is why for the first time in schools, rather than be reading about the burial of Sir John Moore and English poem, we were reading about Naipaul and the Guyanese, Martin Carter, and other Caribbean intellectuals were for the first time being taught in the schools in order to neutralize this British education model that Macaulay mentioned here that was applied to Indians in India. So this is the
Thank
context.
you, Brother Akko. And I just want to make the point that one of the things they talked about during the break, and we have about 6 more minutes, so I want to say this and give Brother Alister an opportunity to take it to the break. The importance, and Brother Akko has said it more than once, those in power who are usually European males, who have all interest in our imperialist capitalist mindset, make sure they control knowledge and information. And one of the main ways they do that is through the media, and the media landscape has changed. Now, Brother Akka, bring this to my attention. Keep in mind, Belize that the only English-speaking country in the Abayala, known as the Americas or Central America. So United Black Association for Development, homegrown cultural organization evolving to a political organization, eventually dissolved after 5 years. February 9th, 1969, UBAD was formed, which is 57 years ago today. But August 13th, 1957, they created the Mandala newspaper. 57 years later, because the Grenada Revolution was 47 years ago, 57 years later, this media house is still here, evolved to Creme Radio, XTV. So Brother Akka was the one who made the point for say, of all the Black Power movements in the Caribbean region, believes that the only country will still have something substantial, material, like one media house, for continue the knowledge sharing, the connections of people across regions, which are why Brother Akka was adamant in a 2025, Sister YaYa, we need to focus on the Caribbean. We, as people, have one level of awareness, have one duty to our unborn children, those living and they want to come before we, for make sure that we will have evidence that we intentionally create one space for share this knowledge in our best interest from the bottom up. You got 4 minutes for carry out this segment, Brother Alister. What are their 2 cents?
The alternative education. It was initiated because the traditional education and religion from the plantation days, they had worked in tandem. They were Siamese. That religion, the Christianity, the missionaries were a part of this colonization, this mind control, this creating this religiosity of inferiority. And so that they always worked in a kind of sync. I think in some ways, going back to the 1970s with Garvey and others, they had set about, they had achieved breaking that. In Antigua, that is not a very much recorded fact, but the workers had recognized that the system existed in a unified way against them. There must always be subservient, there must always be subjects, and that you only rise to a certain level. The education was designed not to create intellectual thinkers, innovators, scientists. No, it was to do some civil service work. So they trained your mind in a certain way, but they then emerged from between 1970s coming back up. People, a few, who recognized that in order to create a new society, you had to have a liberation education. You must have a liberation theology. Unfortunately, up at this point in time, the theology is to me almost more backward than it was. There was an attempt somewhere in the 70s, 80s for liberation theology. Some people even make some of the churches or even make the popes and so the European popes trying to be a little more liberal. But that unity of mind control, of creating that inferior thinking, acceptance that your place in society is limited. And so when you had these progressive movement, I want to compliment your movement. They were set upon. They had they almost wiped out most of them. When they killed Rodney, it was not by accident. He not only created a new movement, but he created a movement that challenged colonialism in a way it never was challenged. Because what the colonialists did was kept almost a divine division between ethnicity, between Indo, Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese. It was Walter merging with UC Quayana, and Quayana giant himself, and Marin. And when they saw that what they kept the Guyanese population divided over, the ethnicity, and that between Walter Rodney and Marin and the UC Quayana had formed that unity and bring Indian and Afro-Caribbean people together, they recognized they had to do the damnness. And so many of the organization and leaders were being set upon, and only set upon by outside forces. In Antigua's case, we in the ACLM team, Hector and others, communists, they've made a boogie of us. They said all kinds of things. because they were programmed to do so. The church was in collusion. So part of undermining the Caribbean development and growth and ensure the stultification of where we are, it is that collaborative betrayal of the Caribbean post-colonial period by its institutions, its religious institutions, its education institution, and we have not moved much farther beyond that, at that point. In fact, I think we retrogressed because we had those independent education institutions and press that between outside forces and inside forces, which white were most of them, so that we are not in a position, in my view, as far as education and consciousness to build that Caribbean that we tried at the Federation. Yes, we have CARICOM, but when you look at CARICOM, you see that well, I don't think we have now. In the last month or so, I think Trump and Rubio decimated CARICOM, and we have not addressed that. That's the issue, that one of the strongest institutions with its weakness, despite of its weaknesses, that brought us to some level, is being set upon like never before. So the institutional education, the alternative, is weaker now, and the traditional institution, they are just going along to get along.
Respect.
Transformation education.
We have to take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Get your body sculpted with gym equipment and accessories from Benny's. Quality and savings.
Smart for everybody. Smart leading everything. Smart give you everything. Smart offer everything. Smart give you everything. North to the east and the south and the west. Smart are the best. Darling, double up my data and give me all the text. In fact, give me a plan for my family. Unlimited calls, so me like it. And Smart make everybody feel happy. Bringing people together, me want it now. Smart got love for everybody. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. More bundles, data plan. Me want my smartphone, internet in my hand. Call me want my Smart plan. Want it right now. Smart. Stay connected. Stay happy.
Coleman Technical High School rolled out the Education Upliftment Program in the school year 2025-2026. Under this program, first farm students are able to get free uniform, 3 sets of uniform, and all students at Coleman Technical High School receive free tuition, free meals. In addition, all students are provided with transportation to school and back at home daily. Most of the parents are very grateful for this opportunity, as it is a rural area and one that has economic hardship.
Most times I would think, why don't I just stop school and try help them around? Because money, financially, it may be a bit hard, but with this upliftment program, it balanced our lives out to creating a better environment for both me and my sister.
It hurted a bit seeing my grandparents struggle, trying to find $1 here and then to send me to school. I was sad, I was depressed, I didn't feel the urge to come to school anymore. But now, with this upliftment program, it helped me a lot, and I really want to further my education.
We were financially burdened and we were struggling, and it was very stressful. But when we heard this project has been in play, it has decreased the financial burden. And also recently, since I was diagnosed with lupus, financially it has played a big part of our life. It was mentally challenging, to say the least. Also couldn't concentrate very good, but now with this project, everything just flow more smoothly.
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria. Con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente, ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito, realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m. en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
Guatemala. This a me we da figure. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. Guatemala. This a me we da figure. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland, will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because no Guatemala. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to
Welcome back to the last segment of Sunday Review for this morning, Sunday, March 15, 2026. If our mom, Jean Hyacinth Marin, was still in the physical realm, she will be 83 years old today. Happy birthday, Mom, in the spirit world for all our loved ones. I had to say that before the show done. And then, on a know how you go, during break, it has a really intense, heated conversation. Juicy or good. And so in this segment, we want to look for lessons learned from the 1979 March 13 Grenada Revolution. And that revolution lasted for 4.5 years. It ended on October 25th, 1983. And even looking at the lessons learned, Brother Alister and Brother Akko, I think it's very important for name the Caribbean countries would join with the United States for invade Grenada, and then look past some of the same countries now with the decisions within the MEC, like for go and be a part of the oppression of primarily African people like Haiti, and look past some of the same countries now where they agree for kick out Cuban doctors and nurses. So for make I just tell you know, who are the countries who according to the United States, then people appealed to them for invade Grenada. So they were Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. Now, of them countries there, you had most of them are part of the regional security system. I never know about it still, but I can mention it, the RSS. The only country where agreed for the United States joining for invade Grenada, that was Jamaica, and Jamaica are never part of the Eastern Caribbean. So just to put that in a mix, Brother Alister, Brother Akko, lessons learned, or we ought to have learned from the Grenada
Before I get,
Revolution.
let me see if I can segue right into the Grenada actual revolution. I attire this way to make a profound statement that is relevant to this discussion. Because I'm searching long and hard of any period of human history that we have had a greater betrayal than what is happening in the Caribbean by not only Caribbean governments, the Caribbean population, and more so, the alumni of Cuba. Something is happening in the Caribbean that James called barbarism. I'll call it the barbarism of so-called democracy. Cuba, which I'm proud to symbolize, to identify with its symbolism, has contributed more than any post-colonial imperialist country in the human resource development of the Caribbean. Let me say that again. Not United States, not Britain, not France, not France, Spain, or any of the Dutch countries. Cuba, facing the worst sanction and embargo in human history, was able, one, to assist the Caribbean, not the former colonial masters, that it should have been their obligation and their responsibility and should still be. Reparatory justice. They did not. Matter of fact, they have not even reached a stage of proper apology, let alone to accept the memorandum of agreement for reparation. But Cuba, experiencing, because it set in motion that struggle that we wage, they succeeded the struggle that we've been waging, we've been undermining, that we spoke about from the 70s. And undermining it in federation, undermining it in the different independent movement. Cuba achieved it to defeat imperialism and colonialism, Spanish colonialism. And not only defeat it, but has had a success by the success or the victory of its defeat of colonialism and imperialism. It shared its success to all of us. When we should have been receiving the scholarship, the human training and development, none of them have come. Cuba have given thousands and thousands for human resource development. And so that I felt it obligated that in a time when Cuba citizens are being set upon, traumatized, and being attacked and forced into hunger and starvation because of its success. It's more successful in medicine research, in academic research, in academic sharing of its resources to humanity from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean. No country has done that. And it's been set upon to reverse that success because it also contributed more than any other to the liberation of Africa, to the ending of apartheid in Quito-Cana Valley. I want to say this, that Morris had no alternative and the New Drill movement other than to continue to go along with a corrupt and despotic dictatorship that was sanctioned by North and South, by the British and by the United States. And that when you have a rigged election, the will of the people have been thwarted. They didn't have any other choice. And in fact, revolution is nothing strange. They almost frightened us in the Caribbean. We didn't want to use the word. The countries who made their history on revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and so forth, on and on, the Haitian Revolution, they're on the mind. But let me share something with you. At the eve of that revolution, to get rid of a despot. This is a working class person responding, 72 years old. When we hear the news of the revolution that morning, it was joy come out in the morning. Joy come out in the morning. As I lifted up that morning, I lifted up above the sky that morning. The revolution made me young again. I young now, as if it just in me like teens. Me energy come true. That happens because of the revolution. Long live the revolution. Long live Maurice Bishop and his party. And we praying for them day and night because they're not seeking for him for one and not for all the other. They are seeking for all the people from a baby to the old. 72-year-old man responding spontaneously to hearing the result of the revolution that overthrew the despotic dictatorship of Eric Gary. But I want to ask the question, which has not been resolved for me, beside the fact that between the United States and the collaborators and the traitors that saw to the demise of the Grenada Revolution that has brought about tremendous success. And let me put it this way, that between 1979 and 1982, I think it was, that the People Revolutionary Government, the new revolutionary government, had reduced unemployment from 49% to 14% unemployment. That's what the revolution did. On the Gary, it was 49% Gary government that was supported by those foreign imperialists and colonial countries. They reduced illiteracy from 35% to 5% literacy in between 1979 and 1980. They built the new international airport. They increased capital investment, the People Revolutionary Government, from 8 million capital investment at the time when Gary was in power, the time before the revolution, to 100 million in 4 years. In fact, the IMF and World Bank that placed them on the blacklist and did everything to suffocate them, before the internal or the external manipulated coup d'etat, they admitted that the economy of Grenada had performed in a way that was surprising and better than nearly all the other so-called democratically elected governments. So I want to place it in that context, that not only the result of the people responding to a despotic government that stole elections and left the people with no alternative, that the New Jewel movement had to lead a revolution, but then they moved to something new, an experiment in the Caribbean that is a part of African tradition, and even the indigenous people that came before. Community councils and village councils were the major policies of Grenada between that period. The people of Grenada, across Grenada, were involved. They were given a chance to make their contribution at village council and community councils, which was something new. And that, more than anything else, frightened the hell out of those in England and those in Washington, or those in London, those in Washington, because they were bringing Maurice Bishop and the People's Revolutionary Government had not only spoke about empowering the people, they now transformed their lives, but they were now given the power of governance that was traditional in African countries and states and villages for thousands of years. They had brought it back where people were discussing the economy, discussing what is the best or what should be priorities and infrastructure in St. George's and whatever village. And that ministers had to come there and be accountable. The question I will close at this phase to ask, what happened? Why is it that up to this point in time, 47 years after, the body, the skeleton, the remains of this revolutionary leader that challenged colonialism and imperialism and defeated them at that revolution with their lackey, Eric Gary, having to take Exodus. What has happened to his body? And that you see that tradition of removing the leaders of revolution. They did it with Toussaint Louverture. People didn't know that. Most people don't realize that they took Toussaint before the revolution, the 1804 revolution, imprisoned him, tricked him in a meeting and took him, and he died in a prison. And they get decimated. I think they got rid of his bones. They did it to Gaddafi. Where is the remain of my comrade and brother, Maurice Bishop?
Big thanks, Breddah.
Why is it? What caused? What caused this internal? I want to share some minutes if we had the time of one of the last meetings of the executive and central committee. I want to suggest to you, in my feeling, that it was more than the overzealous individuals of the cards that could put their brothers and sisters in front of a wall in an English-speaking Caribbean and laid bullets through their bodies, including a pregnant woman, Jacqueline Kreff, former minister of government, and their leader. Where is that culture come from? Where did that originate in the Caribbean? I want to suggest that we have not heard the answer yet as to what or who manipulated the mercenaries or the agents that undermined and destroyed the Grenada Revolution. I would want to rest my presentation there for now.
Big thanks, Brother Akko.
So, the Grenada Revolution, rather than the lessons, which I will get to later, what I want to talk about now is what the revolution did for the Caribbean. For the first time, it gave us a glimpse into the possibilities of liberation. Now, we have moved in the Caribbean from emancipation and then to independence, but we have never really had a concept of liberation. This is why when we analyze, we still talk about the neo-colonial education system, economic and political models that do not serve our interests, but are rooted in the historical reality of colonization and neo-colonialism. The Grenada Revolution, for the first time, gave us a glimpse into what is liberation. And so our struggle for emancipation was not an end. It was a beginning of the process towards liberation. Independence, political independence, the so-called, what I call it, performative independence, was a milestone in that process toward liberation. The struggle for the coming generations in the Caribbean is to fulfill the reality of liberating ourselves from this colonization in all its forms that are now imposed by this imperialistic, what they call neoliberalism, imperialistic form of capitalism. That, to me, is the fundamental lesson of the Grenada Revolution. And it did this in very concrete ways. It did this by transforming its agricultural sector. That Grenada was canning local fruits, nutmegs and juices and so on. Right here in the Caribbean, we had a country that was developing its agricultural sector, right? We had a country that moved beyond the realms of international relations that connected with not just the Caribbean, but with Africa. In fact, one of the reports that came out of the State Department in analyzing the Grenada Revolution, it stated very clearly that while the Cuban Revolution was a threat to U.S. interests and U.S. imperialism, they felt that the Grenada Revolution was a greater threat to the United States of America because, one, the Grenadian population was an African population, and two, it was an English-speaking population that could have direct connections emotionally, culturally, and otherwise with African Americans. And the United States power brokers and establishment felt that this had to be crushed by any means, because one of the problems the U.S. faces is the consciousness of its black population. And so because Grenada represented this threat, you see, Cuba is Spanish speaking. So it was not so much a threat to the population, but Grenada itself was a greater threat. And so one of the lessons we must learn from this is that, as something I've always said, that the Caribbean has value. A lot of our people, and I'm not trying to knock anyone who wants to go and live in Africa. If you want to do that as a migratory or cultural policy, fine. You understand? But don't promote this as some fantastic idea of struggle when you just want to live in a place and do some business, right? We have to understand our own value here in the Caribbean. We are the people who produce Marcus Garvey. We are the people who produced 3 successful revolutions: Haiti, Cuba, and Grenada. Okay, we are the people who have created a cricket team in this West Indies that beat all the major countries in the world for years. We have Jamaican athletes who are beating every track and field people in the world. This is our value, and the Grenada Revolution was a reflection of our value and our humanity. And it's an important statement CLF just made. He said the West Indian people are the most rebellious in history. Right? That is our legacy. And what imperialism and colonization have done is constantly work to destroy the rebellious character of Caribbean people, right? And to return us to a state of sleep, of what I call of sleep, and to undermine our consciousness. And so to me, the lesson, one of the fundamental lessons of the Grenada Revolution is that it gave us a glimpse into what liberation, a liberated territory looks like. We had, for example, the radio station called Radio Free Grenada. 24/7, it played indigenous music from across the Caribbean, gave you news from across the Caribbean, right? We have gone back to the CNN, to BBC, to all of these foreign MSNBC, pumping our head with narrative poisons. And so this was what the Grenada Revolution did for us. And this is why, as an example, it had to be crushed. This is what they said about the Cuban Revolution. It is not so much that Cuba is not democratic. It is that it's an example that imperialism does not want, because it challenges the very existence of imperialism, and it challenges the narrative of imperialism. And that is one of the fundamental lessons of the Grenada Revolution. There were contradictions, yes, but in all processes, there are contradictions. And the lesson we have to learn is that we have to distinguish the difference between our primary contradictions and our secondary contradictions in order for us to move forward. And that is a lesson that China taught us, which I've repeated here. The Chinese, during the Civil War, there was a struggle between the communists and the Kuomintang, the nationalists. When the Japanese invaded, what did they do? They buried their differences to fight the Japanese, because that was the primary contradiction. And then when they defeated the Japanese, they returned to fighting each other, and in the end, the Chinese Communist Party won. And today we have seen what they have done with China in terms of making it one of the most powerful countries in the world. We in the Caribbean, I think the fundamental lesson we must learn from the Grenada Revolution is to handle our contradictions in a way that it doesn't explode and destroy our advancement in processes that are beneficial to us.
Thanks, Brother Akko and Brother Alister. We have to close out the show now. And I knew you said before, Brother Akko, about primary and secondary contradictions. It's one thing to say it, but if nobody to teach you how you do it, then you can't expect that we will even have the willingness to do it. You don't have to teach you how to identify it, how to do it. But in the meantime, I have to close out this morning show. I want to make sure I call the names of the people who were slaughtered, murdered by their own black people. Because oftentimes we tend to focus on Brother Maurice Bishop, right? So he was the prime minister. And then there were other people, and not only them, but that then get slaughtered that day. So we have Maurice Bishop, who was the prime minister, Sister Jacqueline Kraft, Minister of Education, Brother Unison Whiteman, who was the foreign minister, Brother Norris Bain, who was the Minister of Housing, Brother Fitzroy Bain, President of the Agricultural and General Workers Union. Yeah, Union representation. Sister Evelyn Bolin was a businesswoman. Keith Haling, Marketing and National Import Board. Cecil Evelyn Maitland was a businessman. Vincent Noel, former cabinet member. And there were other people who were murdered throughout the revolution. So we have to call their names. They still have family members who have been traumatized. Their lives changed forever because then people died for the liberation of other people. I definitely want to thank again my guest, Brother Alister Thomas, Antiguan cultural icon from the Twin Islands of Antigua and Barbuda. Our co-host, Brother Mutota, revolutionary from the Twin Islands of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Our security guard today was Brother Shane Flowers at XTV. We have Sister Christy Flowers at Christina Studio. Christy? I don't know if you need that today. Star up, that's first day. Get 2 first place as an athlete. Big up, Kirsty. And then downstairs at Creme Radio, we have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G, who was the technician for Creme Radio. This show will repeat at 5:30 today on XTV local channel. You can always go to XTV Belize or XTV Belize Facebook to listen to this program at any time and all XTV programming, and you share the link. And to remind our listeners and viewers, Krista did send me one comment from a Facebook person. Make I just read this quickly. Krista in a studio today. And I think of Brother Alister, maybe even Brother Akko, who have made the point today or at other times that as individual Belizeans, we have to take responsibility to learn. We have to have one curiosity, our willingness to learn. On Facebook, comment from Uprising Brian, when will our true history be taught in our schools? So until next Sunday, I don't know how you go. We got high reasoning here, so I look forward to next Sunday's conversation. Again, thanks, Brother Alister Thomas. Thanks, Brother Mutota. Remember to go to Facebook and learn, listen, read Belize Communication Workers for Justice page on Facebook. Here's an opportunity. We have one movement from below. Would it be intentional in teaching Belizeans? Severance, the one legal obligation of employers to Belizean employees. You go to Belize Communication Workers for Justice Facebook page. You can't say, you got one space to go learn. Until then, remember say, only organized
people
want to save the people. One love.
Pan-Africanism or perish.
Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This time we we don't fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time we don't fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and